Melanie DewBerry here again today, and I wanted to talk to you about love. But I wanted to talk to those of you who, maybe like me, learned about love or are learning about love because you started out on the jagged edges of a cliff. Maybe you got thrown over the cliff. You know, I wanted to do a full view. I wanted to start because I wanted you to see my body. You know, I'm 225 pounds. All of this is 225 pounds, and I'm 55. And it's taken me some time to learn to love my body. I've lost and gained lots of weight because when you go thrown off that cliff, you try to find your way back, right? So maybe you've done other things when you were thrown off the cliff. Maybe you got hard. Maybe you became soft. Maybe you tried to fit in. Maybe you sold out. Maybe you did lots of things. Most of us are told that we have to learn to love ourselves before we can love other people. And, you know, I struggled with that because as a young person, I thought I loved myself. I mean, I'm sure like me, when you were young, when you were a wee one, you did love yourself, and then our childhood gets interrupted, you know. For me, it was a lot of things. I was molested by David, my best friend's brother, by the time I was 7 and 8 years old. My father moved us when we were 9, and by 10, he had died. And those were my first exposures to life is not always going to be easy for you, Melanie. You've heard me tell the story about at the time of this move to San Francisco that all my neighbors signed a petition to have me kicked out, that the neighbor's son tried to hose me down on the way to school. I wasn't allowed to play with the kids in the neighborhood. And then my father died. And then other things happened in my life, like happened in your life, where it seemed like, well, you know, really, where is the love? You know, where did it go? And how do I love myself? I mean, that question really didn't come into my consciousness, but I knew I was hungry for love by some of the behaviors I did. And so I want to just talk about how to find your own sense of love, how to re-engage with love. You know, I read A Course in Miracles, and the Course in Miracles talks about love has no opposites. So what does that mean? It's that love is the one thing, it's the truth, it's the only thing, and always will be. It's the everything that matters. But how do I get to the place of love? So the way I started to patch things together, you know, you've heard me talk about my commitment once my father died to trying to create a world of peace and love, but I still didn't have it for myself. You know, I know my mother loved me, but she just lost her husband of 24 years, 3 girls, and she was scared and she was absent. So I had an absent mother. I had 2 older sisters who I imagine, though we've never talked about it, must have been afraid themselves. And so I was wandering through the world at 9, 10, all the way through to my 30s, alone into the world. Great people who adopted me and brought me into their families, but I had been thrown off the cliff. I had been scraped on the jagged edges, and I would climb back up onto that cliff and try again. The thing that I finally learned was that I didn't know how to really love myself. You know, I gave myself away to men, I gave myself away at jobs, I gave myself away. But what I started to collect as I got older was, what do all these instances have to teach me about self-love? So David, the man who molested me when I was 7 and 8 years old, he taught me about boundaries. Took me a long time to understand boundaries, but I noticed my avoidance of certain kind of men that looked like David, that wasn't working. I noticed that being tough and strong and angry, that didn't work. David tried to teach me those lessons, or maybe those are the lessons I taught myself. But ultimately, when I dropped down into it, if love is present, if love is present in the face of a molestation of a child, if love has no opposite, what's the lesson for me? What can I take away? Where can I learn from this horrible act? I can learn boundaries. As I grew older and I worked with employers who were cruel, I used to have an employer actually in my 30s when I was heavier than I am now. And I'd lost a lot of weight because every single day, I was a middle management and nonprofit, every single day, she would come out and make a joke about my weight in front of my staff. And I lost weight, not because of her, actually. I lost weight because I realized I couldn't move very well. And I started to be a runner, and I started to get very athletic. And so she would come out and make jokes about my weight, come out and make jokes about my weight in front of myself, come out and make jokes, until I was too slim for her to do that. And then she just got mean, and she got ugly, and she tried to fire me. Well, she did fire me. And so what was my lesson, my takeaway at that? What's the love there? She taught me not to defend myself. I don't need to defend myself to anybody. I don't need to justify my existence to another human being. I just stood in my ground in my own humanity. She taught me to love who I was as I was, fat or thin or anything in between. And then as I grew older, I was engaged to a man who had been chasing me for 10 years. Oh, go out with me. Oh, I love you. I adore you. And I finally said after 10 years, because I'd gone through so much good learning and so much depth and interior work, I thought, okay, I've changed. Perhaps he's changed. And so we dated. And the minute we started dating, I'd ask him, so what do you think of this bra on me? Oh, honey, more than a handful is a waist. Oh, what do you think of this skirt on me? Oh, honey, it only shows the good half of your leg. So every chance he could take, there was some sort of knock about who I was. And so what did Keith teach me? Keith taught me self-respect and to listen to what people are saying, to really listen. Are they loving me? Are they really loving me? Or are they teaching me to love myself? So that's how I kind of started to patchwork, really. What is love for me? I know that's a strange opening, isn't it? It's kind of a strange way to talk. So, but here's what I know. Some of us have been really broken. I mean, I've only told you tiny bits about my life, and I've got other sad stories, but I've got multitude of happy stories as well. But so many of us enter into this world open-hearted, ready to go, and then the world just drags us over a cliff. But we're not victims. We're not victims. We're students, we're teachers, but we are not victims. You can find your way back into love. You can drop the protections, drop the anger, drop the identity of abuse, and find your way back into love. You don't have to use the people who hurt you the way I did, but I had to have some sort of breadcrumb because I knew love had to be available because I was born into love. And yet I couldn't find it around me, so I had to find it in me. I had to find it in me. And so I want you to know, if you're struggling, if you were thrown off the cliff one too many times, if your heart was broken, if the world has been cruel, that's not your identity, my love. And so you've got to find your way outside of the drama. And the only way to do that is to find your way to love. So I don't know if you have to love ourselves first. I think sometimes we can learn to love someone, something more. And if we can love someone or something, that love can be transferred back into our heart. I don't have a path of doing 6 things to find love for yourself. But if you can start to patchwork yourself into love by knowing your sense of self-respect, by holding yourself accountable to that sense of self-respect, by learning to say yes to that which works for you, that feels good, and saying no many, many more times than you say yes to everybody else, to really pay attention. Are they loving you? And love doesn't hurt. Love is kind and gracious and patient. Love is absorbing. Love is, it's embracing. Are you really being loved? Because honestly, it's better to be alone for a while than it is to settle. So start to pay attention to the people around you. How do you know you're really being loved? You'll know because you'll start to find your way back into this world. You'll start to drop some of the identities that don't work for you, and you'll start to stand in love, and love will begin to teach you in and of itself, and love will heal you. I know this is not the most fun topic, but I hope you're starting to hear the beginnings of the conversations I'm trying to embed in you. There's beautiful poetry of love in you, my love. Go out and seek it within, and there's nothing wrong with seeking it around you. Aho matakiase.